I think about when I was younger, I had this vision of even if I was, married and we were both working, that it would be ideal to save if we could live on one income, right, and
Right,
pocket the
totally.
other. That's the type of conversation you could have a on
Totally.
a first date without getting into 401k balances, without pulling up account balances. Do you want to be better with money but dread the math? I get it. That's why this show is not focused on math, the markets, meme stocks, or even economic predictions. It is focused on how money fits into your daily life, from having healthy money conversations to caring for an aging parent. I'm Karen Coyne, certified financial planner professional and your host of Money Without Math. Join us for conversations that are practical, sometimes philosophical, and always fresh. Learn more about me at raymondjames.com/clarity and be sure to subscribe. Love and money are deeply connected, even when we don't want to admit it. On this episode of Money Without Math, divorce attorney and Love Richer creator Jackie Combs joins us to chat about how young women can set themselves up for financial success, whether single, dating, engaged, or married. From financial red flags in relationships to prenups, boundaries, and building confidence around money conversations, Jackie shares practical insights to help you love richer. She's a partner at Blank Rome in LA, specializing in matrimonial and family law, and she's the creator of Love Richer, an educational platform focused on the intersection of love, law, and money. Very active on Instagram. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, same. Thank you. I've been following your content. You put out so
Yeah.
much great content. Before
Well,
we get
yeah.
into some of that, tell us a little bit about what led you to launch Love Richer.
Yeah. So obviously, I've worked with clients over many years, and what I've seen mostly with individuals is that during the divorce process, there is often a financial surprise or a hiccup. And I think if people understood these issues earlier on in their relationships and could have these difficult conversations around money, you would be able to navigate your life and your relationship differently, which would lead to different outcomes. So it's really an effort to empower women, individuals, but particularly women, to have these difficult conversations about money and love and what their life and what they expect early on.
Yes, that's fantastic, because even here in the year of 2026, there is still a very pervasive sentiment that we as women defer
Hmm.
to our often male partner to take the lead on finances, even when we ourselves
Yeah,
are educated, competent, successful in our own right.
totally. Totally. It's interesting. Part of what led to Love Virtue was I was at a dinner party with, extraordinary women, very successful, some of them, founders with 10 digit, net worths, maybe even a more. And all of them over the span of this conversation, once they found out that I was a divorce attorney, started talking about their lack of purity in their relationships, deferring these financial decisions to their husbands. And I knew if they, felt the same things as my clients, despite the fact, of their wild success or the same feelings that, even my friends may have, that this feeling, transcend numbers. And it is something that, many women really need to grasp and get a hold of so that they can have a better life.
Right. Yes. And it's not that we've established it's not that these women aren't capable. They're just
Right.
choosing to either see it as a form of, I don't know, is it protection that they're being loved for, that they're being cared for? Is it part of this, stay at home kind of renaissance that we're seeing where there's a glorification of being the soft, stay at home, feminine
Soft girl.
archetype? What is it?
Well, I think, it stems from a lot of cultural norms, right? We're the third or fourth generation of working women. I think that money has always been a taboo topic, and that is something that I speak actively about, that money should not be a taboo topic. You know, if you avoid money, it will rear its head, and these conversations must be had. Otherwise, there will be decisions later down the road that you will not have control over.
Yes, right. Either you make the decisions or they're made for you. uh, which we'll get to that in a second. But I was thinking about the reason, or part of the reason why we first connected is I saw an article that you did that was on CNBC, and it was
Mm.
6 money questions to ask on a first date. Now,
Yeah.
do you really want people talking about this on a first date?
I think it's important to align with somebody that you're dating with, and alignment is in all aspects, right? You want to have similar hobbies, you want to have similar interests, you want to have similar aspirations and goals. If you are looking for a long lasting partnership, because marriage is a partnership and you want happily ever after, these are important things to know. And one of those that people often overlook is money. So, no, I don't think you need to exchange your 401k balance on the first date, nor do I think it's appropriate to say, okay, how much do you make? But I do think it's important to start understanding how they value money and whether your values are aligned. This could be as simple as somebody asks you out on a date, but then asks you to split the bill. You may not be down for that. And that is a character trait that you have to determine whether or not you guys are aligned for the future. So, using an example, you could ask them, if you won the lotto today, which some people maybe not like this hypothetical, but if you won the lotto today, what would you do with the money? And you will know if this person, would just spend it all, if they would save, if they would create generational wealth, what they would do in, their life. And that will, reflect a lot of their values. Or another example is, tell me a difficult, financial, something you had to overcome financially. And that's really going to show, somebody how they address adversity and move forward. Again, another character trait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think about when I was younger, I had this vision of, even if I was, married and we were both working, that it would be ideal to save if we could live on one income, right? And
Right.
pocket the
Totally.
other. That's the type of conversation you could have a- on
Totally.
a first date without getting into 401k balances, without pulling up
Right.
account balances.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the legal basics that everyone needs to understand, because I think
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't understand is that if you're not drafting the legal documents yourself, they have already been drafted for you.
Many times. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the laws of your state, if you're talking about divorce in particular, everybody has a prenup. It's determined by the law of the state that you divorce in. And so it is really important to take a proactive approach to understand what those laws are. And if you move, what those laws will be and how that will change and how that will impact your life.
And are there any specifics that you recommend people really take a look at and understand?
Yeah. I mean, I think the prenup conversation is inevitable. You should have the conversation whether you agree to, jointly agree to forego a prenup. That is a joint financial decision. And if you want to take the risk, totally, you've made a joint financial decision. But it's important to understand what rights you are giving up by virtue of not entering into a prenup, or what rights you will have in the event of a divorce.
Okay. And can you give us some examples of where a prenup in particular might make a lot of sense, where people might not
Yeah.
see it, where they might overlook it?
Yeah. So if you are marrying into extraordinary wealth, there should be an expectation that you will be asked for a prenup. And so many people might feel uncomfortable because, oh, we're planning for divorce. No, you're not planning for divorce. You have to see a prenup as creating a framework for financially successful marriage. And where a prenup for that situation could be very beneficial is it can create, I'm in California, so we're a community property state. So it could create community property where there wouldn't otherwise be. Why that's relevant. And in when you're marrying into significant wealth, you may essentially live off your partner's separate property. And so there will be no joint property. And that money is on borrowed time. So if you don't create joint property or do not create a framework through a contractual agreement, such as a prenup, that you are going to have joint property, you could leave a 20-year marriage and not own a home.
This, I'm thinking too about the women who maybe start off, they have a career, but morph into being stay at home.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about why prenup is so important in those situations?
Yeah, similarly, you can create benefits for yourself if you choose to stay at home. So if it's your joint decision to stay at home for one parent to stay at home, that stay-at-home parent is going to give up very valuable years for their work and their career that could transcend what their salaries or income and estate could be later down the road. And it's very difficult, not for everybody, but for many people to go back to work after being out of the workforce for 10 years, right? And the opportunities that you get in your 40s or 50s are very different than your early 30s or late 20s. And the salary is going to be different. So what you can do is create a framework of, okay, well, in California, we're, for example, spousal support is typically for a marriage that's less than 10 years is one half the length of the marriage. Well, if I'm going to be married for 9 years and have stay at home for 9 years, I might want an additional protection that spousal support is going to be longer because the joint decision for us was me to give up my career to support your career so we could support our family.
Mhm. Right. So I think you referred to it as benefits, like you're creating benefits for yourself.
Creating benefits, or it could be, such as a gift for each year of marriage that goes into my account that's going to be my separate property in the event, or we're, contributing to a retirement account that's for me in the event of a divorce, or any of these other different kinds of frameworks that you can create. So the point is you're not giving up those years. You are still building wealth, or you're still having additional protections such as a longer duration of support or other, other benefits that you wouldn't otherwise get under the law.
Mhm. It's great to see the whole prenup conversation just getting a little bit more or less, stigmatized, more destigmatized,
Totally.
right?
It's really great.
Are you seeing that among your clients as well? I mean, you tend to work with
Yeah.
higher net worth clients where it might be more commonplace to begin with, but even among more mass affluent, is it something that you're seeing trending?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the increase in millennials and Gen Z, of talking about prenups, getting prenups is so much higher than obviously prior generations, and there's a lot of research around it, that has come out, in the last year and year and a half. Um, and the expectations that these are conversations that we need to have. And I think one of the benefits is obviously we live in a digital world. We are so much more privy to, information, and with information, people are able to make better decisions or smarter decisions or more well-informed decisions. And I think that's why, you see this increase with prenups in the younger generation.
Mhm. What if, someone's listening, all right, we're already married, we didn't do a
Yeah.
prenup, and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, she is describing my situation." I have an
Yeah.
MBA and I dropped my very successful career so that I could stay at home and raise our children, and now what?
Now what? Well, I think you can always pivot. I think you can always evolve, right? And I think you can always have these conversations. So in that circumstance, obviously it depends on that family's circumstance, but I think it's a, important conversation to have like, "Hey, our marriage is going great, but I am feeling insecure or uncomfortable that I don't have additional financial security in the event something happens. I'm not saying that anything will happen, but I need a little bit more financial protection in order for me to feel safe in our relationship and continue to maintain the household." So that could look like, a financial decision or at least a discussion of what you need to ensure that you feel comfortable in your marriage.
Mm, that cannot be easy for someone who's already been punting, so,
No, it's not,
uh,
but it's
but
necessary.
it's
It's necessary.
necessary.
And it doesn't have to be this, you know, uh, you know, this huge fight. And I,
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend that. I think it's really, you have to come from a vulnerable place where I feel uncomfortable. I feel unsafe. I need to know what the numbers are. I need to understand what this means. And if you are shut out of that conversation, that's where it's important to seek, professional assistance so that you can start gathering the information irrespective of your spouse is willing to give it to you. Though they do have a fiduciary obligation to provide you this information, just as a tidbit, it's always important to advocate for yourself because at the end of the day, it's you.
Yes, this is something that I really try to impart also in my audience is that, if you've been that reluctant partner or spouse or individual, uh, because you hate that stuff or you dread it or you think you're not good at it. Listen, if you hate it now, you're really going to hate it down the road
Right.
when your circumstances change
Right.
because they will. It's just a matter of time before life punches you in the face, whether it's death,
Right.
divorce, disability, some other unforeseen event. Uh,
Right.
and you don't want to be trying to learn a whole new language, a whole new landscape, a
Right.
hundred new passwords at a time when you're already eh, challenged just getting out of bed and remembering where you put your keys.
Totally. Totally. I mean, it's so important. Listen, I think with marriages, transparency is non-negotiable. And that translates in all aspects of your marriage. But one of the important things to think about is it's not just planning for divorce. It, to your point, it's sickness or death. I've had known so many individuals where they become widows unexpectedly, and they have no idea where how their mortgage is paid. They have no idea where the bank accounts are. They have to find out all of this information. And by the way, the lights have turned off because they didn't know they had to pay their utility bill. And they are, very bright, successful, smart, well educated, financially secure women, but they don't have the passwords or they don't know where these things are. And so that's really what it's about. It's about ensuring that how to turn the lights on in your own home, where the bank accounts are, what will happen in the event of a life curveball, because inevitably, like you said, there will be a life curveball.
Right. Yes. And then, even you don't have to be a portfolio manager. You don't have to have the level of expertise to run a portfolio, but even some basics like understanding the different tax characteristics. There's a big difference between someone who has wealth that is largely in retirement accounts when you're,
Right,
maybe in your 30s or 40s or even 50s versus in taxable joint accounts, right? Non-qualified non-retirement
right,
accounts. There's a big difference in how you can access those funds and what the tax
totally.
ramifications are, and just having a basic understanding of those types of things and how much life insurance coverage you have. And we could go on.
Totally.
But yeah, the point is we want you there. We want butts and seats. We want you on the phone
Yeah,
calls and in the meetings.
absolutely.
One last thought on prenups is children from previous marriages. Someone has been,
Yeah.
maybe coming into a second marriage. A prenup could also play a role there, right?
Totally. So, and that's a really great point. So, the advice that I would give my 25-year-old clients versus the advice that I would give to, let's say, a 45 or 55 or 75-year-old client is very different. And it obviously is dependent on their financial circumstances and what they plan to do with their life at that time. So, to your point, if you're coming into a second marriage and you have adult children or even younger children and you have obligations to those children based on whether it was your prior judgment or your estate planning documents, or obviously your obligations to them just as your parent, you want to ensure that when you go into a second marriage that some of the assets are protected for your children, pursuant to those agreements or pursuant to the life that you built prior to the second marriage.
So again, more conversations
Obvi-
to
Yeah.
explore and
Yeah.
loop in. You don't have to do it on your own either. You can do this by
No.
setting up an appointment with your financial professional, with your estate planning
Right.
attorney, and have the
Yeah.
conversations assisted in that manner.
Yeah. And the best way to have that conversation is to be clear about your expectations from the start. And I think, Gen Z calls it clear coding, right? So it's important to say if you're getting into, going to have a second marriage, hey, I have obligations to my children. These are, pursuant to this agreement, or this is, the life that I built before you. And I want to make sure I'm going to take care of you, but I also want to make sure that my children are taken care of. And I would hope that you would appreciate and respect that. And obviously, a partner who has good intentions is gonna understand that.
Yeah, I think you hit on it earlier where you said you're coming from a place of vulnerability, right? You're coming from a place of we're all working together. It doesn't,
Right.
there's just such a notion and that stigma that goes along with prenups. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think you can really
No.
just approach it from a healthy way. But you also said
Wow.
something that I want to, it was a great segue into you mentioned transparency.
Yeah.
And something that you talk a lot about is red flags and
Yeah.
if there are incompatibilities, if there's misalignment, if there are these red flags in the
Yeah.
beginning, it could be trouble. Tell us what you
Totally.
tend to see along those lines.
Yeah. Well, I would say one of the biggest rooted causes, or excuse me, one of the biggest causes of divorce is a lack of communication. And that lack of communication I notice is often regarding financial matters because money is one of the biggest causes of divorce. And it's while they may be small issues up early on in your relationship, they become bigger issues. And using an example about misalignment. You may want to have a home in the suburbs. Your spouse wants a home in the city. There are different prices. They are going to lead to different lifestyles. You are not aligned on that choice. And that can cause friction down the line because one of you will ultimately have to compromise. And they could be both really terrific decisions, but you have to think about how that's going to transcend into your marriage later down the road.
Right. Oh, yeah. Huge, 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 huge. Uh, then there are some more maybe seemingly obvious to someone who's on the outside, like control.
Oh, yeah. So if we're going to talk about red flags, excuse me. Yes, control is a big issue. Lack of transparency is a big issue. If they are not willing to show you their bank account statement, or if they are not willing, your spouse is not willing to show you their credit card statement, I think that is a major red flag
Mm.
because it doesn't mean you always get a decision in what your spouse is going to pay for. Obviously there should be alignment on big picture items, and it depends of your prenup terms. But the lack of unwillingness to show you, I think, is the problem, is the root cause, right? The lack of transparency. And in a prenup, one of the benefits about a prenup is that it requires full financial disclosure. That means you have to list all of your assets, you have to list your debt, you have to list your income, exchange tax returns, do this comprehensive, disclosure exchange. So that way, you know what you're signing up for. And what so many people don't realize is when they sign that, marriage contract, you're entering into a financial relationship with who you are married. The debt that they take on, just because it's not in your name, it doesn't mean you won't necessarily be responsible for it, or the community won't be responsible for it. When you sign those tax returns, you better know what you're signing. It's under penalty of perjury. So you better know what your spouse is doing. So, lack of transparency, unwilling to discuss these conversations, a defensiveness when discussing money. But I think, part of what I talk about is that so many individuals in prior generations really didn't have the tools to be able to communicate about money. I can communicate about money because I communicate on a daily basis, and communication is a skill that I've had to learn. And communication is a skill. It is a practice. You get better at it as you do it. And having these difficult conversations, yes, they can be very heated in the beginning, or they could be difficult in the beginning. But as you grow in your relationship and as you practice these conversations, you will get to a point where you can have them and they will be more productive and they should be collaborative. But of course, you're coming at it from very different perspectives, different experiences, different emotions, and you have to navigate that when you have these conversations.
Yes, it's a lot. We bring a lot of our baggage to the table, our past experiences, trauma,
Yeah.
anxieties,
Yeah.
whatever is attached is very emotionally charged. And
Yeah.
I've said a gazillion times on this show that, especially when you're engaged, I feel like everyone comes up to you and says, "Oh, Jackie, communication is key. Communication is key."
Yeah.
Like, yes, okay, I know communication is key, but no one tells you how to do it. And so
No.
that's what I love about these conversations that we have with people like you is
Yeah.
give us the language, give us the tools, tell us how
Yeah.
to talk about it. Like help us open up the conversation so that it's not just, "Hey, I'm mad and I'm upset and we need to talk about this."
Mhm.
Give me your
That's definitely
statements.
not how you should
Right?
do it.
That's
That is
definitely
definitely not how you should do it.
right.
No, you have to come really like, listen, I always have this phrase where, timing is everything and your communication is everything. If you are on a deadline at work, not a good time to bring up a bill. If you want to Netflix and chill, not a good time to bring up a bill. Like, you really want to set up your financial conversations like you would any other business meeting. Hey, this Friday afternoon or on Sunday, whatever the day is, let's have our money talk. Let's have our monthly check-in. Let's have our quarterly, planning meeting. You want to establish it just like you would, I don't know, going to the nail appointment, right? Your nail to get your nails done. Like, you carve out time out of your day to have these conversations so you are able to focus on it and then move on.
Right. Yes, I even know some couples that do it like a quarterly offsite or a semi-annual
Yeah.
offsite just like you would with your professional team.
Brilliant. I think it's great. I don't think that's for everybody, it might be too much or whatever it is, but I think it is really great because you want to connect about these things, and that's financial intimacy, right? We talk about different forms of intimacy in our relationship, but financial intimacy is imperative for a long-lasting relationship.
Yes. Yeah. I thought it was interesting you shared with me in a previous conversation that Gen Z is prioritizing financial stability over chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like, that's what the research is showing, and I think it really goes again to this, information is knowledge, right? And it's much more prevalent now that we're in a digital world, and I think people want stability and want to make sure that they set themselves up for success in their long, lasting relationship. And of course, Gen Z is coming at it from, seeing what has happened in their own parents' relationships and divorces, the economy, the housing market, all of that, throw it in.
Yes. And they have so much information at their fingertips. They have all this content at their fingertips, that we didn't have even 20 years ago.
Yep.
There's been articles about how Gen Z is pouring record amounts of money into Roth IRAs, which is fantastic. But
Right.
again, I mean, that's just, and I'm glad that they're acting on this information. Just because you have information doesn't mean A, it's good information, or B, that you act on it. But in this case, it's good information and they're acting on it.
Absolutely.
So, Jackie, so far we've talked about quite a bit about prenups. We've talked a little bit about how to open up some of these tough conversations. Is there
Mhm.
anything else around, women in particular and helping them just make sure that they are setting themselves up well?
Yeah. So I think you have to look at decisions in your marriage and in your relationship as financial decisions too. It's not just staying at home to raise your children. It does have financial ramifications down the road if your marriage doesn't, last, or if something happens to your spouse. So that would be, where you would want to consider life insurance, or that would be where you'd want to navigate, okay, well, what does spousal support mean in the state that we live in, and let's have a conversation about it. So I think it's always, planning ahead in a financial lens. The other thing I would say is really having the tools to be able to communicate about money. So part of what I teach and what I've, built out is the four dimensions of financial intimacy, and it's how you can evaluate every money conversation when you're in a relationship. From little decisions to big decisions, whether sending your kid to, private school or not, whether to buy a home together, things like that. And what it is built off of is alignment, autonomy, communication, and transparency. And using that in practice, let's say, Karen, you and we're married and we're buying a house together. So the first thing that we're going to do is, are we communicating about what kind of house we want? What can we afford? Where we want to buy? Two, are we being transparent about where the money's coming from? I'm not telling you that my parents are giving me, $100,000 to contribute towards that down payment that I would be able to get back as my separate property. That's not being transparent. That's not really being fair to you because you don't know what's really going on. Are we aligned on this decision where, I'm saying again, I want to, let's say, buy a $5 million house, and you're saying, I'm not comfortable with that. I want to buy a $3 million house. And I'm just throwing out numbers for this example,
Hmm.
that I feel is outside our budget. And then, do we both have autonomy in this decision? Am I saying to you, no, 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 you don't need to be on title. I'll be on title. You don't need to be part of the debt. Or, I'm the one who's going to put down the majority of the down payment. So I'm going to have a bit greater interest. Are we each, feeling good about this decision and having autonomy in this decision?
Mm.
So that's my, like, practical framework where I think that is really helpful for individuals to discuss money issues in their relationship and evaluate these decisions as they navigate them.
And it doesn't mean that it's going to go smoothly, right? Using the example of maybe you want the $5 million house and I want the $3 million house.
Right. Right.
Maybe that is going to be a not easy conversation,
No, but
but
we're talking about it.
we're
But
talking
we're
about
talking
it.
about it.
The key is that we're
Right. We're
talking
not
about it, and
going.
I'm not just, going along with it, but secretly really resenting you
Right.
and complaining and have this resentment that's growing inside.
Right, because that quiet resentment erodes relationsps, and that's what
100%.
people don't get is these money conversations or these money decisions, not feeling like you have a seat at the table leads to resentment down the road, and it leads to greater ramifications in your relationship and, fractures it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So the recurring theme is you have to talk, you have to have these conversations, and you've shared some conversation openers, even on a first date, which I love.
Yeah.
And even if you are engaged, if you're married,
Yeah.
Jackie, we've covered so much in such a short
Yeah.
period of time, but is there anything else that we didn't get to that you want to leave listeners with along these lines?
Um, like I said earlier, communication is a is practice. It takes time. It's a new skill like riding your bike. And once you do it a little bit, you will become better at it, and these conversations will be easier to have.
So just get started.
Just get started. Just
Mhm.
get started.
And, to nudge you along if you need help in having those conversations, we'll share a link to your, content
Thank
because you
you.
do share a lot of just great insights and I think conversation openers, that will be helpful to folks that maybe need a little nudge. So,
Thank you.
thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks again for listening. Please follow us on Spotify if you're not already so you don't miss any future episodes. We'd also love for you to rate the show while you're there. Connect with us on social. Search Karen Coyne CFP on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have feedback or if we can be of service in any way, please let us know. And now for the standard disclosures. Any opinions expressed by Jackie Combs are not necessarily those of Raymond James. Raymond James is not affiliated with nor endorses Jackie Combs, Blank Rome, or Love Richer. This podcast is for informational purposes only.